Welcome to the Shunned podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Before we get into the story today, I'm going to take a quick moment and take care of a little business. The first thing I'd like to put out there is that I'm looking to do another coaching/support group. I just wrapped up my first one at the end of the month, and I'm considering doing another. This would be something that's going to start the first Sunday in May, go 4 Sundays throughout the month. If you're a person who is struggling maybe to find themselves after the cult, if you're a person that feels stuck, maybe you have a hard time accepting compliments or thinking positive thoughts about yourself at all. These are a lot of the things that we'll be talking about, the things that people end up struggling with after they leave the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses or any other group. And, in a group setting, these groups are usually kept to 6 or less. You get to meet and talk to other people that have been through similar things as you. There's wisdom in the group. In the group setting, people have been through things, so you'll see that you're not alone. You'll see what other people have used that have helped them. Of course, I'll be there to chime in and ask helpful questions to make you think, to challenge perspectives, and also to provide a helping word when possible. This is something that I do. It's all online. It's through a Zoom group. The cost is $99 for 4 sessions. That's 4 Sunday nights in a row. They're 2 hours each session, so you get questions ahead of time that you can look over, so you're not ambushed during the group session. And I want people to feel comfortable coming to them and participating, thinking about what it is that how they would answer the questions. And you'll see as other people answer the questions, it'll stoke something in your mind. Oh man, I hadn't thought about it like that. Or, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. And, those are the things, the connections that you'll make between each other that really help people to process their past, as well as, we do a lot of work on trying to find ourselves in the present. And then at the end, we even take a little time to dream together. So if you're interested, go to shunnedpodcast.com. There's a coaching page there. Just click on that, and you'll find all the information you need to sign up or to shoot me a question if you need to. And I hope that if you're out there and you're feeling stuck, or you're feeling you're really struggling maybe in your new life, you've got this new freedom, but you're not really feeling it. Maybe you're just kind of feeling a little bit lost. This is a great way to kind of help challenge some of the ways that you think, some of the ways that you feel, and to try to find something better for yourself. I also, if groups aren't your thing, I totally understand. I also offer individual coaching. And honestly, I offer individual coaching for just about any subject you can come up with. Coaching is a methodology. It's not industry specific, as people would say. It's not specific to any one thing. So whatever it is that you're struggling with, it's probably something that we could work through in a coaching modality. So again, you can email me at shunnedpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to talk to you. And maybe we can see if we can work something out and help you to find the life that you deserve to have after leaving a cult. So today we have the story of Nico. Nico has actually been on the podcast already. Most people may or may not remember, but at the end of episode 23, after Sherry's interview, he told his story of his first Christmas. He had told this story in the Facebook group that I have, and it was such an amazing story that I asked him if he would call in and record it, and I actually played it on the show. Nico is one of the youngest guests I've had. He was able to break free from the cult with so much life ahead of him. But of course, the life that he left behind is still fresh. He hasn't been out that long, and he still lost a lot of people that he cared about in the process of getting free and finding himself. In his story, you're going to see what kind of person he is. You'll see how he tried to live that dub life, and how things happened that led to him waking up. Very few of us really sought to wake up. This was just something that happened. And the same happens with Nico. He was living life, and it was just a series of things that happened that helped him to see the way out. In fact, there's a story at the end that involves another person, and I know that you, like I, will want an update on that person. I'm not going to spoil anything here. So I actually have an update on that person, and we will share it after the interview. So without further ado, let's go ahead and meet Nico.
My name is Nico. I'm 22 years old. I'm a former Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
All right, Nico. So then, you said 22. You're pretty young.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've interviewed. I guess I don't know. I don't remember everybody's ages offhand, but you may be probably among the youngest I've interviewed. How did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
Well, I kind of came in twice. And if that doesn't make sense now, don't worry, it'll make sense later.
All right, no worries.
So my parents have been split up pretty much since I was conceived. I'm from Arizona originally. My father lived in Massachusetts. And I guess I visited my dad when I was around 4 years old, but I honestly don't remember that. I do remember visiting my father when I was 7. And it was at this point that I was first exposed to the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. So my father had married a woman named Carol, who's an amazing stepmom, by the way. And she's been a Jehovah's Witness for pretty much her entire life. And her side of the family stems back, I believe, 2 generations back to her grandmother, which would be my great-grandmother, who I did actually enjoy the privilege of getting to know pretty well. So my father wanted to marry her because they were kind of raised together, or at least raised around each other. And so obviously the stipulation to date a Jehovah's Witness is my dad had to start studying. And so my dad started studying, and it was at this point that I was introduced to the cult, because my father had fought for legal visitation rights in court and won. So
wow,
I started
that's rare.
going. Yeah. I honestly had no idea what any of that meant. And the reason why I guess I was stopped from seeing my dad is because my mom had felt that I was being abused by him.
Yeah,
as an
that's
adult,
what I was thinking. If you can't, like, if you don't have those rights, I would think that then fight for them and actually get them. That must be a hard process. So,
yeah, from my understanding, it took a while. I mean, according to my father, I saw him when I was 4, and then I didn't see him again until I was 7. So you're talking 3 years there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started visiting my father. He lived in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And at this point in time, we had moved back to Massachusetts as well. And we lived in Springfield. And if you're not familiar with the area, it's about 2.5 hours away from each other. So when I started going to visit my dad, I started going to meetings with him because he was studying at the time. My stepmother was already baptized, and she had been baptized since, I believe, the age of 16, if I remember that correctly. And if I don't, well, she's not going to listen to this anyway. So,
I mean, it sounds about normal. That's a typical age for somebody to start doing that. So,
and at first, I thought it was really cool because as a family, like on my mom's side, we had always been somewhat Christian. I was baptized as a Catholic. At this time, my great grandmother was still alive, and she lived with us, and she was very religious. Crosses everywhere. She would talk about scriptures all the time, and so I was well aware of what the Bible was and how important it was. So when I started learning things, like actually learning things, not like at the Catholic Church where I was put in the back room for 2 hours, I thought it was the coolest thing. And my father introduced me to the Bible storybook. And usually I studied with my stepmom more because my family dynamic at that point in time, my dad worked a lot more than my stepmom did. So I was usually home with her more. So we would read the Bible storybook, we would go to meetings, I would prepare for meetings. I can't recall if my first visit I started giving comments, but I know it was very shortly after my first visit with my father that I started commenting at meetings. And for a point of reference, I would visit my dad every school vacation, so grand total of maybe 3 months out of the entire year.
Gotcha.
every December, Christmas break, spring break, Thanksgiving break, and then summer.
Yeah, so you can see, you were getting, I guess, a taste of it, but it was kind of broken up. How did it impact you when you weren't with him? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you kind of keep that message and that narrative that, you're being taught as a kid with you when you go back home and start kind of looking side eyed at the Catholicism or the crosses and all the stuff that you were exposed to, or do you just kind of blend back into that life as well?
It was a little bit of a mixture of both. At least at first, I would say between the ages of 7 and 8, I would go back home and live with my mom, and I would tell her everything I learned. And of course, my mom being now we weren't good Catholics by any stretch. We only went to church long enough so me and my brother could get baptized. That was pretty much it. But while my great grandmother was alive, we were very staunch Catholics, at least by appearance. So I would go back and I would ask questions of my mom, and she would, give me her counter argument. And, up to a 7-year-old, my dad is my hero at this point in my life. So, of course, I didn't listen to anything my mom said because I
Of
was like,
course.
well, dad is so great. He did this, right?
Right.
And then I would say around 8, maybe 8.5, I stopped doing holidays, so I would be willing to leave during Christmas time, because before that, my father would pick me up the day after Christmas and I'd spend the week with him and he would take me back home. But once I, started taking it seriously, quote unquote, I stopped celebrating holidays. I would still get my Christmas presents, but they would be unwrapped. They'd be in my closet. So when I got home from my father's house, they were just there. And obviously I thanked my parents and Santa.
Well, of course, Santa. Can't forget Santa.
Yeah, I thanked Santa until I was about 11. I figured out he wasn't real because my brother got a snowboard for Christmas, and that same snowboard just happened to come in the mail 2 weeks prior. So I figured out real quick that Santa wasn't real. But so yeah, I stopped celebrating holidays, and it was around this time my dad got baptized, which I was super excited for because I thought, oh my gosh, my dad's he's gonna have everlasting life. And I remember when my dad got baptized, I looked over at my stepmom and I said, what did dad win? Because everybody was clapping, right? And she was like, oh, he won everlasting life, which to an 8-year-old, 8 or 9-year-old, my dad's my hero at this point. And it was just like an overwhelming experience. And I was like, oh, dad's going to live forever.
Yeah, man,
So,
that's the best prize you could win. That's magic.
yeah. So I called my mom immediately after I can't remember anymore if it was an assembly or a convention. I think it was an assembly. And I was like, Mom, guess what? Dad won everlasting life. And of course, the Catholic in my mom broke out. She got really pissed off about it. And which, of course, it only fueled me to think that it was the truth more at that age,
Yeah, of course.
because I was being so opposed, which I was told would happen by my father and stepmother and everyone in my congregation at the time.
Oh, isn't it so manipulative how they know that, so they tell you that right off the bat, so that
Yeah.
and couched it in a way that you're going to get this opposition, and it just shows that it's Satan trying to stop you from doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep. And that's exactly what I believed. And
of course we all did.
so, I mean, earlier I said I kind of came in twice. So the second time that I, quote, came into the cult was around the age of 13. So my mother, who had been completely opposed to the so-called truth for, but from the age of 7 to 13, completely opposed. We had just bought our first house. I say we, but I didn't spend any money, so it wasn't really we.
Get a job, young Nico.
Yeah, exactly. 13 years old, go get a job. So my mother had just bought this house with her then husband, and we needed some trees removed in the backyard. So we called this tree guy to remove some trees in the backyard so we could actually do stuff with it. And of course, he just so happened to be an elder from the local congregation in Wilbraham. And he started preaching to my mom And at first, my mom was a little skeptical, but eventually she came around and she agreed to a study with the tree man's wife. Her name's Dorothy. Very nice people. They helped us out a lot, not, excluding the religion stuff aside. They helped us a lot with other things. We had a few financial struggles and they helped us. And
Well, that's cool.
yeah, they're super nice people. I mean, my mother disagrees with this a little bit, but I think they're very genuine people. But she knows them significantly more than I do. I just know them from my mother's studies. So my mom starts studying with the tree guy's wife, Dorothy. And I'd say she's probably studying for about 4 or 5 months. And my stepfather, James, who was completely opposed to the truth, he thought it was complete malarkey, didn't believe anything that was coming out of their mouths, randomly, about 5 months into my mom studying, asked if he can sit in. And of course, for me, at this age, I'm like, well, this has got to be the truth, because look what Jehovah's doing. He's bringing both sides of my parents, because he knows how much of a struggle it is for me to have two families that up until I was 15 basically hated each other. I mean, my mom would have stuff to say about my dad and Carol. My dad and Carol would have stuff to say about my mom and James. So it's like I was this middleman for such a long time, and now it finally felt like, Jehovah was reuniting my family in some weird way that eventually would fizzle out. But, it felt like it was the truth. So, and I always kind of felt like it was the truth. But of course, at 13, when my mom started coming in, and 14, when my stepdad started coming in, I was in middle school, high school, and I was experiencing things that you don't experience as a Jehovah's Witness. So I wasn't taking it as serious as I was when I was, 7, 8, 9.
Right.
And basically, by witness standards, I was living a double life. So I was going to meetings, I was commenting, preparing. I wasn't on the school, not till I was 16, because I wouldn't let myself be that fake. I could be fake enough where I could get people to smile at me at the meetings and I could comment to get a little bit of praise, but I wasn't going to be fake enough where I was going to go up on stage and pretend like I actually cared about this, when at that point in time I didn't.
Yeah.
So I started studying with Tim and Dorothy's son, Nathan, about at 14, and we studied the Bible Teach book. He was about 21, 22 at the time, and he would come over I think it was Monday night, and he would study with me and my brother separately. And there was 3 of us, so this was 3 hours of him studying with us. At 21 years old, I don't know what he was doing with his spare time, but apparently it wasn't fun, because he was studying with us for 3 hours a week.
Studying with kids is rough. I remember having to do that when I was younger. Like my dad would study with the parents of some kids, and then like I get, hey, look, you've got a Bible study now, Mike. Here's these kids you can study with, and it was not a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I remember a lot of times during the study, I would purposely say stuff just to get underneath his skin. Like we got onto the subject of why having sex before marriage was bad, and why you shouldn't be dating unless you're ready to get married, right?
Right.
And just to spite him, I was like, oh, by the way, I have a girlfriend, right? I was such a snob, man. But so I studied with him till I was 16. When I was 16, I had decided that I wanted to go live with my father, because I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was something in me that I was like, I need to take the truth seriously, and I need to get on top of my game and start actually doing this and stop this double life bullshit. So I moved in with my dad when I was 16, and that same year I got baptized. Pretty sure I was 17 when I got baptized, but just the way my birthday falls, it happened to be the same, year since I moved in with my dad to when I got baptized.
Gotcha.
And, at this point in my life in the cult, I was like the golden boy. And I'm not saying that to try and like bump my own ego or anything like that. It's just that all the other kids that I grew up with, at least when I was on vacation in that congregation in Cape Cod, they had all either left or faded away. There was about, I'd say probably 6 of us, and they all disappeared.
So you were the great hope of the congregation that, they could keep Nico.
Yeah, exactly. And there was one other boy who ended up becoming my best friend, but he and I'm not going to say his name, but he was a little bit on the autism spectrum, and he had a hard time communicating with people. And I don't know why, but for some reason I understood him and he understood me, and we just had a really loving friendship.
That's really cool.
But I think I was more the golden boy because I was very outgoing, and I was the one who was, I was out in service all the time. I was giving talks up on the stage, number threes, number ones, which at the time is what they were called.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you can
And
combine performance plus personality, as a young person, yeah, you are going to be the golden child.
yeah, and that's kind of how I felt. I mean, then I had plans to go to Bethel. As soon as I got baptized, I auxiliary pioneered for 5 months, and then I got on the regular pioneer list. It might have been 6 months actually, but and then I got on the regular pioneer list, and I was doing all these great things, right? And I was like, I had such good goals and all this other stuff. Of course, that changed a little bit when I got reproved at 18, thanks to my girlfriend at the time. Because you can you can teach a kid all you want, but he's still gonna have desires and urges that whether you think they're wrong or right, they still happen. So
Yeah, so it wasn't really because of your girlfriend, it was just you had a girlfriend.
yeah, I mean, I got reproved for sexting, which
Yeah.
personally I think is a really stupid reason to get reproved, but okay.
But I mean,
So
what I'm
yeah.
saying is, I mean, it wasn't all her fault.
Oh, no, no, no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
no. It
I just
definitely
didn't want
takes
it to sound like that.
no. Yeah, I mean, at first, of course, I thought it was her fault because I have the habit of making myself the victim, which I credit to the whole persecution complex that Jehovah's Witnesses teach you. Um,
Oh yeah,
but I
yeah,
mean, now as an adult, I can clearly see, yeah, bits of it were her fault, but the majority of it was mine too. So it goes both ways.
yeah. Of course it does.
But yeah, that's pretty much how I came in um, to the cult. I kind of came in twice, once at 7, and then again at 13. I kind of took off from that 13-year-old stance and became this good Jehovah's Witness.
So, as this good Jehovah's Witness, once you started taking it seriously, how did you perceive the world around you? I mean, like, did you, because it seemed like you had kind of led that double life. Um, did that change? Did you start seeing people differently?
Yeah, it definitely changed. I mean, not so much while I was living the double life, obviously,
Right.
but when after 16 and after I got baptized and I started taking the truth real serious, it did change, which was a huge struggle of mine because I love people. I mean, before this interview, you and I talked for about a half hour, and I've never bet you a day in my life. I just love talking.
Yeah, me too.
so so it was hard for me to view worldly people as evil and to keep them in their place, so to speak, in my life. Because, I mean, I'm not trying to brag here, but I'm not an ugly guy. So girls in school was definitely a difficult issue, at least from a Jehovah's Witness standpoint, because I mean, it's not like I had a ton of them. I'm not like I'm not a gorgeous dude. I'm not gonna lie, but there was always
Oh,
one.
go ahead and say it, Nico. You're gorgeous.
No, I'm trying to distance the narcissism.
No, but I mean, I understand. It's got to be hard to, to live in this world where you're supposed to keep yourself separate from these people, but then you have people who are pursuing you. That's got to be difficult.
Exactly, and I mean, and it wasn't just girls that were pursuing me. I had, my best friend in school. His name was Alex. He was a really cool guy. He knew I was a witness. I didn't tell him that at first because I was kind of embarrassed, and I was a new kid at school, and I didn't want to get bullied for being weird or anything like that. So I didn't
Sure.
tell people I was a witness for a while, but I acted like a witness. I didn't swear, didn't celebrate holidays. I was just me. Um, but another thing that was really difficult was sports because, I mean, the very first day I walked into that school in Mashpee, the football coach took one look at me and he was like, "You play football?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You want to play football here?" And I was like, "Oh, I can't."
Oh, I feel your pain.
Yeah, I mean, it really burrowed a hole because I love sports. I mean, baseball,
Yeah,
basketball, football,
me
anything.
too.
That's just, I grew up playing that stuff. I mean, prior to us being witnesses, I remember we would have these family gatherings, and that's all we would do is play sports and eat food. And, we had a trampoline, and we would play backyard football, and we would, play basketball and trash talk each other. But it was like this thing. So that was a huge part of my life. And to be told that I couldn't do that was really hard. And it was even harder because it's not like my dad could do these things with me, because my dad blew both his knee out a long time ago, and he hasn't. He can't run with me. He can't. I mean, he can throw
Yeah.
a football with me, but that gets boring after 6 tosses. So
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like you had anybody at the Kingdom Hall that you could. Doesn't that sound like there was many other young people? So it's not like you had a bunch of brothers at the hall that you could play sports with either.
yeah, not at first. My parents were pretty protective, and I wasn't allowed to branch out until I was a little bit older. When I was 18, 19, I started branching out and made friends.
Because you
But
got a
yeah,
little more independent, maybe, or like
yeah,
you
I
had
had
your
my
own
own
car.
car.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, having your own car as a young witness is very freeing.
Oh yeah.
Very, very freeing.
It's awesome. so so yeah,
Oh, and I mean free. I'm sorry. I just mean freeing so that you can go out and service when you want. So that you're not tied to your family. Like if your family's sick, you can still make the meeting. That's what I mean by freeing.
yeah, you're free as long as you're doing Jehovah's will.
Of course. I wouldn't want to discourage. I don't want to discourage any active witness parent who might hear this from letting their kid get their license. So,
Right. So I mean, it was so serious with the whole no sports at school thing that I stayed after for a baseball meeting, because the coach at the time was like, "Look, I understand you have your religious obligations, and I'm willing to work with you on them, but we would love for you to play on this team with us." And I was like, "Oh, that's like music to my ears. That's exactly what my parents want to hear." And so I stayed after for one of the baseball meetings, and my stepmom walked into the baseball meeting, which was so fucking embarrassing,
oh no.
and pulled me out in front of everybody. And it was the worst feeling ever. Oh God,
God, I can't imagine.
I mean, I'm reliving that experience right now, but I really don't want to, because it sucks so bad.
Yeah, that's about. I mean, that's pretty damn embarrassing.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, that didn't stop me from trying to play on sports teams. When basketball season came around the corner, I asked my parents about that, and I was like, "Oh, can I join basketball?" And they made me write up like a JW talk number 3 type report on what the pros and cons of playing for a basketball team were. And of course, I had all the JW narratives in there. Well, I don't know when practices are yet, but they could be on meeting nights, and that would take me away from Jehovah or whatever.
Yeah,
And
it's like
so,
self. You just were made to almost like self brainwash your. To look at this stuff so that you could brainwash yourself into feeling the way they wanted you to.
yeah. And I mean, I understand from my parents' standpoint that they were trying to get me to think on my own, but that's not what happened, because I was
Yeah,
thinking with a bias towards the Jehovah's Witness cult. So,
absolutely.
so I mean, that bummed me out for a long time, especially since I didn't have anybody to play with. I mean, my friend Mark would come over and we would shoot hoops every once in a while, but he wasn't really an athlete. He was more of a computer gamer. So we didn't really have a ton in common with that, at least in the things we did for fun aspect. But I mean, again, that all changed when I turned 18 and got a car and all that. But yeah, that was like a super depressing time period.
Yeah,
I
I
had
mean
nothing to do.
it's difficult because all kids just want to fit in. I mean, kids want to fit in. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. Um, your talents were seen by these coaches, and the potential there, and you had to hide them. You were kind of forced to.
Yeah, and it even got to the point where I was afraid to perform during gym class, because I didn't want any added pressure from my coaches or my teachers to try and join a team, because I'm very much a people pleaser, and I hate telling people no. It bothers me that I have to tell people no. I have no problem doing it, but I still feel bothered when I do it. So every time they would ask, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but it's just going to get in the way of my religion, and I can't have that. It killed me that I had to tell people that. So
Oh
there's
yeah.
that.
It's almost like you were raised around a cult where you
Yeah,
couldn't say
exactly.
no to anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing any of us can say no to this day with, just the way we were brought up. Um,
Mm.
we had to say no to ourselves all the time, but saying
Hmm.
no to other people was very difficult. And I mean, I still struggle with it. I think a lot of people do. It's something we've all had to
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. So those are kind of my struggles with childhood. I mean, and I even got asked to prom by a girl, and I had to tell her no, and that sucked because I had a huge, like, all year. She ended up becoming my best friend, and I had a huge crush on her. And we ended up winning an award together, and we sat next to her at the award ceremony, and my dad took pictures of us. But I knew it wasn't going anywhere because she wasn't, she didn't love Jehovah. So
Yeah, I think that's sad. I think that's one of the things that, like, in retrospect, I look at as an adult out of the cult, and just the experiences we were robbed of. And I'm not going to say that all experiences of young love are good, but
mhm.
we were never allowed to even just have those innocent, boyfriend girlfriend things that kids do. And like, we just, I don't know, there's just a natural part, I think, of the progression of growing into adulthood as a young man or a young woman. And you kind of you learn things along the way. And I don't think that any of us were really allowed to do that. We were just all kind of forced at, I don't know how it was where you grew up, but at least here in the Midwest, if you're not married by the time you're, 20, like, like, life's passing you by and you're becoming a spinster and going to have a lot of cats because there's just not that many people around. So like, you've got to get married, and you've got to get married usually pretty young, at least in your early 20s at the latest. And
Yeah.
uh, you've had no experience, and no, just no real, not even a lot of real interactions with the opposite sex. And so it's, or same sex, or whatever your deal is. But well, obviously that wouldn't be allowed in the cult. But you're just not allowed to. There's no experimentation in life. Like, everything is like the real deal, or you don't do it. Like,
Yeah.
dating is just getting set up for marriage, or you don't do it. So
Yep.
you really lack a lot of experience, and we were all robbed of a lot of opportunity and experience there. And so I hate hearing stories when, like, you had that girl you had a crush on, you could have gone to prom with. Like, why rob a kid of that? You know?
Yeah, and I think it also robbed me of a lot of vital social skills when it
Sure.
comes to talking to girls.
Heck
Or I
yes.
mean, and for other people, if same sex attraction is yours, then the same thing occurs. You're robbed of the ability to communicate to someone you have romantic interest in.
Oh, absolutely. You can't even, if you have the same sex attraction as a witness, you can't even, like, you have to deny that you even have that. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? For the most part, I mean, not everybody, I'm sure, but that denial there of opportunity, but even of who you are and what your sexual attractions are, that's so, it's just so messed up. And I hate that all of that is put on kids.
yeah.
We were all just kids. There was a song I remember when I was a kid, by the Verve Pipe. It was called Innocent. I think that's what it was called. And I don't know. It was just about how, like, oh no, I'm sorry, not Innocent. It's called Freshman, the Freshman. And like, we were all just freshmen. We were all just innocent kids. We were all trying to learn. We were all trying to figure things out, but uh, we weren't really able to. We weren't really allowed to in any way. So, just even speaking, like you said, to the opposite sex, it's hard.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, even now that I'm out, I'm still learning how to do it because I mean, I've only been out for 7 months, so I still have to fight against the brainwashing and talking to girls that you don't want to marry is a no, at least in the cult, and I'm still working against that. So I'm
Sure.
still learning, but I'm figuring out gradually. I'm getting there.
Yeah, it's a really I mean, at least you get to do so now instead of waiting till you're like in your 30s or something. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
at least
Yeah, that
at 22, there are still a lot of people out there who are learning a lot of things. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Um,
I mean, I remember the first Worldly Girls phone number that I asked for was maybe a month ago, and I was so awkward about it. But it's funny because I can laugh at it because I know my experiences. But I just met her at a job, and I left and then came back and then left again and then came back again. And the third time I came back, I was like, just do it. And I was like, hey, you maybe want to get a drink sometime or something? And she was like, I'd love to. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And yeah, it was super awkward, but
hey, good for you for, being able to muster up the courage too. I mean, that's a big step.
yeah, it was funny because when we did actually end up going on a date and we talked about that, and I kind of explained a little bit why I was so awkward about it. She was like, oh, I knew you were going to ask for my number when you came in the second time, but I was surprised that you came back a third time and did it. And I was like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and I think, we all have to kind of own that past of ours and let people know because it does explain a lot, you know, um, about us and it's not that it defines us, but we're all learning and growing and people can usually respect that. Um, so
Yeah.
so all right, so you got baptized, you're 18ish, um you're starting to, well, let's see, let's talk about school. So did you, so you finish high school, that around 18, that's a big milestone, and there's a lot of big decisions to be made there. Are you going to go to, college, is if that's something that your family is okay with,
Yeah.
or are you going to pioneer, or what are you going to do? So when you got to that critical, part of your life, how did that go down for you?
Well, so because of all the quote tribulations I was facing in my junior year, my parents actually decided to pull me out of high school and homeschool me for senior year. So after I finished that, my dad was very supportive of going to college for a trade. So I could go do like a 2 year program and get some kind of skill and come out. Um, but I was not okay with that because I was pioneering at the time, and my goal was to go to Bethel. And I was like, if I get into debt, I'm never going to get accepted to Bethel, and I need to finish pioneering for at least a year and wait till 19 and have no debt so that I can do this. So, which I'm not gonna lie, I do regret now. I do wish I went to college at least for a trade. I mean, I happen to get a good job now, but it's working for a witness, which kind of sucks. So I kind of wish I had another skill to lean on, but unfortunately, transparent wall engineer is all I got.
Transparent wall engineer, I like that.
And for everyone else who's listening, maybe other than David, who doesn't know what that is, it's just a window cleaner. But that's what I tell people, so my job sounds cool.
I like it. I've never heard that one.
So yeah, my dad was okay with college. My stepmom was more of a proponent for going to Bethel and, aiming my life towards that. In my later years, they would tell me, well, we weren't really raising a man, we were raising a Bethelite, because I wanted to start dating at 19, but we'll get into that later. So yeah, that was kind of my life. I mean, I had my car. It wasn't anything flashy. I got it for $900. My dad matched me on it to buy it. It was just a 2003 Saab 9.5, which prior to me buying it would have been a nice car, but they went out of business. So it was just kind of like a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, and that's not good either when you're, pioneering, and you have to drive a lot, and you have this cheap car that is going to have problems and is not going to be probably easy or cheap to fix.
Well, we didn't really have that issue really because my dad was a mechanic for a lot of his life,
Oh, well,
and
that's nice. Yeah.
he taught me how to fix it. So I
Cool.
mean, I replaced the clutch on that thing when the brakes went out. I did that on my own. I had to replace a water pump. I did that, and
Oh,
um,
you got some skills then.
I know the basics. I mean, I can't get a job as a mechanic, but I mean, if my friend needs me to do something, I can do it.
Yeah, you could be
Uh,
Nico the shade tree mechanic.
yeah, my dad and I always joke that we're a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
Because I mean, my dad did carpentry. We both did IT. We both have done plumbing. We both have done electrical. We can fix cars. We can build garages. So we just kind of did everything on our own if we had to.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So let me ask you. So you were obviously aimed toward Bethel,
Yep.
and that was a goal. So let me ask you. First of all, how much of that goal um, was actually yours, and then and then what, if anything, was the draw for you to go to Bethel?
Okay. I got to think about this. So my drive to go to Bethel was that I wanted to be like my uncle Alan. My uncle Alan was like your model Jehovah's Witness. He came from a drug dealing life. He was dating a worldly girl, started studying when he was 18, and he ended up in Bethel for 6 years. And he's actually in one of the Young People Ask videos.
Oh wow.
And I don't know if you remember, but the Young People Ask video with Andre the Runner.
I
My
I really
uncle.
don't remember. I think I'm I might be old enough that there weren't a lot of videos, so
uh, well,
I
in
had
the
the book.
video, there was a guy named Andre who ran for school, but he was a witness, and his friend in the movie named Berto is my uncle.
Cool.
And in the movie, it's kind of funny because my uncle gives this Jehovah's Witness steroids so he can continue running after an injury, which I thought was hilarious. But I wanted to be like my uncle so badly because he was like this model citizen in the JW community, and I was like, well, I'm gonna follow in his footsteps then because I mean, how great of a goal is that? And after I had my first girlfriend at 18 and I got reproved at 19, my goals in that department kind of shifted because I realized that I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it so I could be like somebody else. And I just
Wow.
wasn't okay with that.
That's a pretty profound realization at that age.
Yeah, my dad asked me about it one time. He's like, how come you gave up Bethel? And I was like, well, I just realized it wasn't my goal. I mean, I would rather put my energy towards preaching where the need is great because that's something that I feel like I can excel at because I love people.
So let me ask you, and obviously you do love people, but you could love people where you actually were. So my question would be, were you really interested in going to where the need was great, or was that just the next step down from Bethel? So like it was a way to reason around it. Well, I'm not going to Bethel, but I'm at least interested in this next step of the hierarchy of ways you can serve.
Well, I was always encouraged to have goals, right? So, um, it was a way for me to get people off my back about Bethel. That
Yeah,
that much is absolutely true.
yeah,
But at the time, it was something that I genuinely wanted to do.
gotcha.
Um, and I did realize at the time that I could love people in my territory, and I did. I mean, I had Bible studies, and I was out in service all the time preaching to people, and I talked to anybody who would listen. But I would read these stories about the yearbook of people having these experiences. I mean, even in the United States, where Jehovah's Witnesses aren't as active, you'd have these experiences of people going down there and they would preach, and it's like, oh, they come back with 16 Bible studies, and I was like, holy crap, that's awesome! I want to experience that. So that was like my motivation. Kind of selfish, I know, but that was my motivation for doing that. Is I
Well,
wanted to.
yeah, I think it's. I don't know. I think all goals are selfish on some level. uh, I mean, otherwise, I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting something that's going to bring you something too. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't completely selfish. You wanted to help people, and you wanted the studies, and you love people. So I think that honestly, that shows that you were really you kind of had a pure heart about it. you weren't trying to just put it on for a show. You really wanted this, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's why I resented my uncle's comment so much on my Facebook page, which no one else knows about. But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, calling you out for never having it really in your heart, because you did. You did.
yeah,
You were sincere, and for somebody, no one. That's funny. People leave the witnesses or whatever, and the witnesses always want to say, or the witness adjacents want to say that you, it was never really in your heart. It was never. They've got to find some way to blame you and to say that like it was never really yours, because otherwise, well, what about them? Could they change their mind as well?
yeah,
Like it, because really it's just projecting. It's projecting their own insecurities, and as to their own faith. And you obviously were sincere. I was extremely sincere when I was in it as well. I think we it's easy to discount the sincerity of another person, but it's very difficult to read other people and to be able to when you start trying to speak to the motives of another human being, that's a slippery slope.
mm,
So I
yeah,
think it's cool that you can see that you're this sincere kid who is trying to do the right thing, and who really cares about people. And I'm glad that it didn't work out for you, obviously, but
me too.
but at least you weren't going into it with any kind of malice or bad motives, or you weren't just playing games.
No, yeah, and I was trying to be the best possible Jehovah's Witness I could be. I mean, I was such a good witness to the point where my friends who would, let's say, for example, have an issue with porn and they wouldn't feel comfortable talking to their elder dad about it, I was the one that they came to. Or, when it would snow, 70 feet of snow outside, I was the one who would drive around to the older sisters' houses who spouses have died, and I would be shoveling their driveways for them and shoveling their walkways and salting.
No, I mean, you were just doing that for the glory.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently, that's what they think now.
That was just all about the personal glory.
I mean, never mind the fact that I could be outside playing in the snow with my brother and throwing snowballs at him, but
Yeah, you just cared about people, and that's a beautiful attribute. It's a good quality.
yeah, and that's one of the few things that I accredit to Jehovah's Witnesses that I have kept a part of my personality, is the care for people. Like I hate seeing people struggle, and if I can help it, even if it's only minimal, I try always to do it.
That's a really good thing. And unlike Jehovah's Witnesses, you actually help people who are not only your own.
Yeah. I don't restrict it to just people who have my quote faith. So
Yeah, we don't have to all be the same to help one another. So then, okay, so you've given up your Bethel dream. You got in trouble with this girl. You're still thinking that you want to go where the need is great. How does that progress for you?
So it kind of worked out perfectly. At least that's how I felt at the time, because I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the whole process. You get reproved, you lose your privileges for a certain amount of time, and then when these men think you've earned it, you can have them back.
Yeah, you start to build them back.
Yeah, and just as I hadn't got them back yet, but I was really close. A brother in my hall who I ended up working for later was organizing a trip to go to Alabama to do seldom work territory. Well, actually, technically, I don't think it was seldom work territory. I think by definition it was unassigned territory, meaning it hasn't been touched. Gotcha. Almost never.
Yeah, I've done that. That was actually fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I enjoyed my experience too, and it just worked out so perfectly that 3 weeks before they were supposed to leave, I had gotten my privileges back. And the brother who organized the trip obviously thought of me because he knew my goals, because we were close. We played basketball together. He was a bit older than me, and he moved into the congregation, when I was 18, 19. And he was maybe 2.5, 3 years older than me. And we would just play basketball, play sports together, go to the beach together. And so he invites me to this, and I was like, oh man, I can't go because I don't have all my privileges back and I'm not exemplary. So he's like, well, I'll tell you what, I'll put you on the list, but we won't submit it to the branch until you get your privileges back, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah.
So 3 weeks before the trip, I get my privileges back, and he added my name to the list because I guess he had to submit it to the society already, but he kept my spot open. So he added my name to the list, sent it to the branch, I got approved, and we went. And it was, I mean, as far as reaching goals was concerned, I felt like I was on the right track to getting there. And I mean, I remember feeling so cool, and I got interviewed after we got back on the Thursday night meeting, just to kind of talk about the experience and relate, you know, how many Bible studies we started, how many people we talked to, how many books we placed, how many, you know, whatever, all the statistics that they like to pat themselves in the back for.
You know, it's funny. There's never any follow-ups on any of that, is there? Like, you know, you go and do this thing, and you talk to all these people, and you place all this literature, and you think that you've started these studies, and then you go away and go back home, and everybody's on this spiritual high, and you have this part on the meeting, and everybody's sharing their experiences. But, you know, 2-3 months later, what impact did that actually make? You know, I always wonder, do any of these people who were studied with, how many of them ever become Jehovah's Witnesses or continue studying or even study the first time or what? You know, you don't know.
Well, that actually was one of the things that kind of like really angered me at the time, because as a group, we kept in touch with people that agreed to studies until somebody would get to them to study with them. And I mean, you're looking at, I think it was 7 months before one of the most promising studies was ever reached out to by the local congregation there.
Oh, that's efficient.
Yeah, I mean, it almost felt like what we were doing was kind of pointless. And I was like, well, I mean, and I justified it at the time as, well, maybe that congregation is just, you know, I cut them slack because the unassigned territory that technically was theirs was an hour and a half away from their kingdom hall and from where most of the people lived in the territory. So I cut them a little bit of slack, but still I was like,
well, no, what it shows is that it's not, the point was never about the unassigned territory. It's not about those people. It's about you. It's about Nico and his crew going to this place and having this experience that pumps them up so that they can go back home and feel good and be good witnesses. If it was truly about care for those people, those people would be followed up on closer than 7 months out. And Jehovah's Witnesses, if you're saying that you can really save a life through this study and you really believe that, then why isn't your ass getting out there and talking to these people? You know what I'm saying? Because it's not about that. It's not about the people in the field. It's not, field service itself isn't about the people in the field. It's about you guys staying busy enough that you don't look at the doctrine and that you self-brainwash by telling people these things. Because, I mean, even witnesses will tell you, like, one of the reasons that we would give comments or we would give talks or repetition for emphasis or whatever, the reason, even in the congregation, they'll tell you it's to drive these things deeper into your heart. It's brainwashing. That's all. That's all it is. And if you go out and tell people about a thing, you're going to believe it more. Even if I don't believe it, like a salesman who doesn't believe in his product, if he goes out and tells enough people about it, he's going to start believing in it.
Yep.
You know, so that's all it is. It was never about those poor souls that y'all were reaching out to in unassigned territory. If it was, they'd be out there helping those people anyway. They don't need a group from where were you at the time, Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Yeah, like they don't. Like, there's enough people down there that if they really care about human beings, they could reach out to those people an hour and a half away. You know, like,
yeah,
there's ways, but it's not. It's a game. It's all a game.
Yeah, I mean, it worked because I was so excited about that trip that I ended up going on a second one, which we can talk about later when we get into my adult independent life as a JW.
Gotcha.
But I mean, their tactics work to a T, because and I mean, and this was 3 years apart or 2 years apart from each other. And I was still just as excited to go on my second trip as I was for the first one, based off of the results I got. So, I mean, it totally worked.
Of course it does. I enjoyed it too. I'm talking about me too. I fell for it. We all did. Yeah, it's just like conventions and the way that they're strategically positioned throughout the year. They're just there to get you hyped. They're just hype machines. That's all it is, so that you can continue doing this awful, boring thing. That's all it is.
Yep. Oh, man. It's kind of nuts to look back on it and see it for what it really is. And it's like, man, I really believe that?
I know. I can't believe what I mean, it just blows my mind what I fell for now. But, especially when you're raised in it from the time you were a kid, you're up against something so powerful it can suck adults in. So what chance do you really have? Oh, excuse me. What chance do you really have as a kid?
Yeah, none really.
No, very little. So, okay, so you go on this trip and you come back spiritually recharged.
And feeling stronger than I ever have spiritually too.
Yep. Absolutely. So where does that take you?
Well, that kind of just, from there, I guess, spiritually speaking, I just kind of plateaued. I mean, I got back into my regular rhythm of, I wasn't a pioneer at the time because I couldn't, because, again, prior to that trip, I had been reproved, and for whatever reason, you got to wait a certain amount of time before you can pioneer again. Long story short, I never ended up pioneering again. Thank God. And for reference, God's in quotes. So yeah, I just kind of plateaued. I was still doing parts on the meeting. I was still doing everything I did before that, with the exception of pioneering. I mean, I was still doing my best to take care of the congregation. We did move from place to place a bit, which I think kind of fueled me too, because the circuit overseer had come around and said, oh, this congregation over here in East Falmouth could really use some bodies. And so he asked 3 elders in my congregation in Sandwich, will you guys move over there? Now, my dad was never an elder, a servant, or anything like that, but we had decided that we were going to go with them because my dad and I, at least, were so-called computer geniuses. So we were like, well, we can help out with the issues they've been having with sound, because the congregation I was in was totally fine with sound. We had plenty of bodies working it who knew what was going on.
If you can operate or turn on a laptop in a lot of congregations, you're a technical genius.
Well, in this congregation that we went to in East Falmouth was very old fashioned. I mean, they had little turn dials and switches, and there were 0 kids, and I'm not exaggerating. There were 0 kids. I was at first, I was between the youngest old person and me was about 30 years. Ooh. And I was only 20 at the time.
Wow.
So, I mean, as far as technical knowledge, and I'm not trying to disrespect anybody in that hall, but it just wasn't their forte. So there was always issues because individuals didn't know which switches did what led to where, and how everything worked. So it was just kind of like this giant shit show every meeting.
Yeah, it's just a generational thing and isolation thing.
Yeah, so my family gets there, and of course as soon as they got our record cards, which was expedited thanks to the circuit overseer, because normally it takes about 3 months, at least in my experiences, because I've moved around so much. They put me on sound. I was in charge of redoing the territories, which I'm not gonna lie, was really fun. I enjoyed redoing the territories.
Sure.
And being in charge of them. It was really exciting to, I felt like I was helping out in a way
you
that
have purpose.
Yeah, I felt like I was helping out in a way that no one else could. So it was cool. It was really strengthening, and I was in charge of sound. And it was kind of funny because we ended up having this sort of elders meeting type of feel. Obviously it wasn't an elders meeting because I'm not an elder, but the elder who was running the meeting says, okay, so for all you older folks, You see this young man right here? If he walks up to you and says you have an assignment on sound, don't think he's just being some young snob. That's his job. That's what we told him to do. So that was, I mean, ever since then, I started getting respected more as an adult rather than a child.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because, you know, no one really knew me up until then. So, I mean, that was like a huge thing too, because now I had respect from the elders, I had respect from the servants, and I had respect from this congregation that on average was much, much older than me, which I thought was really cool at the time, because just being that young and being allowed to teach someone older than you was like almost never heard of.
Oh, absolutely. In the hierarchy, that's pretty tough, and that was really a pretty cool thing for that elder to do. To, you know, like, he didn't set you up to fail; he set you up for success by saying, "Hey, look, everybody, like, Nico here is doing what we're telling him to do. You know, what we've asked him to do. He's serving, and you need to respect that." So that was a very kind thing of him to do that, instead of just throwing you out to the wolves.
Yeah, well, he was very compassionate. He was one of the very few elders that I would still, but I wouldn't have a problem being a friend with today.
Yeah.
Like, he was just very down to earth. He understood the struggles that come for anybody. I mean, he was just very empathetic, very compassionate man, and you know, he was my favorite elder, even though, you know, we're not supposed to have favorites, but he was definitely my favorite.
Oh, everybody had favorites.
Oh yeah. I remember them giving talks on the platform for local needs about not having a favorite elder, and I was like, well, I'm apparently sinning because I have a favorite elder.
And the elders have favorite, you know, publishers, or that one brother or sister that they're like, oh no, when that, you know, that person comes up to them because they know they're going to have some sort of problem or something like that they want to talk about. You know.
Yep.
Yeah. Everybody has favorites and people that they don't really want to be around in the congregation.
Yeah.
That's just humanity at play. So how did it go for you in that congregation, being that, you know, you were kind of embraced in that way?
It went really good. I mean, I never really felt like I belonged in the Sandwich congregation. And I think it's just attributed to the fact that I mean, everyone loved me. It wasn't like I was, you know, abandoned or anything like that, but I just had nothing to do because everything was being handled. That congregation was much younger. There was no need for a young one to step up. So when I got to that congregation, I really felt like I had somewhere where I belonged. And even though there wasn't any young people, at this point, you know, I'm 20 years old and I was already branching out and I had my friends. So it didn't really bother me. But the fact that I was doing Jehovah's will and I was helping to advance a congregation, you know, it was just like super fulfilling. So it went really good. And then when I was 20, I decided that I was going to move to Hawaii because my father and I were fighting. And just a quick backstory on that. My dad and I have always fought. I think it's just the father-son dynamic. and he wasn't always like this. He doesn't do it with everything, but he's very much he's like a two-way parent. The first way he taught was like negative influence. Like, he was the type of guy who would say, well, you'll never succeed in that. And he was doing it with the intention of trying to stir me up so that I would shut him up and do it.
Gotcha.
So I live with that my life. He, you know, convinced me, well, you're never going to make it if you do this or you do that. And it was all stuff I was doing. So I took it to heart and I was like, fuck you, dude. I'm going to prove you wrong.
Reverse psychology.
Yeah, exactly. And then he just tried to like force a relationship, a father-son relationship that it wasn't what he was expecting it to be. Which now, as an adult, and now that I've gone to therapy, I understand that it's just because he didn't have a dad growing up. So he doesn't really know what a father-son relationship is supposed to be like. So he was just trying to fulfill it with everything he was missing, which doesn't work for me in my life experiences because my life was very different than his. So It was just like a clash of ideas, I guess you could say. So anyways, I ended up getting kicked out and I moved in with my friend Dion for a little bit. And then my friend, who I still work for, despite being disfellowshipped, offered me a job in Hawaii. And so, of course, I was like, what's the best way to shut your dad up about not making it in the world? Move 5,000 miles away. And that's exactly what I did. And it was kind of sad to leave my congregation that I was in because I felt like I belonged there. But at the same time, proving that I could survive without the aid of my father seemed more important to me at the time. And so I left off. I mean, they gave me a really nice send-off in the congregation. After my last meeting, they were like, oh, before we sing our last song and say our prayer, we just have an announcement for the congregation. Nico's leaving. He's flying to Hawaii, of all places. And we know he's going to do great works for Jehovah there. We wished him the best luck, and everybody clapped, and, the whole shebang. And I got hugs, and people were crying and stuff. But it was tears of joy because they were happy that I was moving to Hawaii and not having to live in snow. So, yeah. And then, that's pretty much how that came about. And then I was a faithful witness for a couple of years, and then I got disfellowshipped after that.
So how did that go down? You're in this. I mean, first of all, what's it like to move 5,000 miles away? Like I can't even wrap my head around that. I've never even traveled that far away. So, but to move that far away, that's a pretty big leap, especially for somebody so young to do that. Were you scared or just excited, or how did that feel for you?
It was definitely a mix of both. At first I was really excited. I was like, holy crap, I just got the opportunity to move to Hawaii, and I took it. And between the idea of moving to Hawaii, like when I got the job offer, and to when I bought my plane ticket and actually took off, was a span of maybe 6 days.
Wow.
And I didn't have enough money, so I did a couple side jobs cleaning windows for a sister. And I made the money. I bought my plane ticket with from 6 days from start to finish, and I just left. And I think I was so excited about the situation that the fear didn't really hit me until I was already here in Hawaii, which was an interesting experience, to say the least. But
well, yeah. So you land. So, and maybe you said and I missed it. Was there somebody there you were going to stay with?
Yeah. So during this 6 days, and at the time, it solidified my faith a little bit more because I thought this was Jehovah's hand for sure. During the 6 days before I left to Hawaii, I was on Craigslist looking for apartments, looking for places to stay. And I found one. But because I was so young, she was a little bit intimidated to have a 20-year-old staying in her apartment. And the way things work in Hawaii is you have a house and a detached or sometimes an attached apartment that are called ohanas that are usually on the same property. So you're very close proximity to your landlord. So anyways, I had my boss, who was a brother, call her and give her recommendation and kind of just talk me up to ease her into it. And anyways, she said, okay, that's fine. You can stay here. Here's how much the rent is. But the only issue that I ran into was I couldn't move in until 28th, and I landed the 26th. So, But luckily that got solved because my boss let me stay with him for those 2 days.
So you already had work lined up in Hawaii.
Yep. I landed on the 26th. I didn't start work until the 2nd. So I had a week or so to get acclimated to my new surroundings. But yeah, I had work lined up. I had a place to live lined up. And I had transportation lined up in the form of public transportation. So I took a bus to work every day for the first 6 months I lived here.
All right. And you got to tell me, because it's the winter here, and this week we're supposed to have something called the polar vortex drop down and have negative wind chills and stuff. What's it like to live where it's not cold?
It definitely took getting used to. My first week of work, because it's so freaking hot all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm used to it now and I don't sweat as much, but I mean, I was just, and I work outside cleaning windows still. Yeah. Excuse me, transparent wall engineer. And I was just drenched in sweat, but your body gets used to it really quickly. And I mean, I miss the fall because of the color change.
Yeah.
But I don't miss what comes after the fall. So I'm okay with eternal summer.
Okay, and then my second question is, do you need a roommate? I can clean windows. I'll bring my wife. We can,
I mean, if you guys really want to move out here, we'd have to get a new place because the place I'm in now, I do live on my own, but it's definitely too small for 3 people. But I'd consider roommates for sure.
I'm okay until spring. Once spring starts, I'll be happy here again. But man, the older I get, the more I hate winter. I just do. I get so tired of the gray days. I just want to see the sun, you know? Oh,
Well,
but
every time I miss the winter, because I do miss the snow,
I'm
I
sure.
go back and visit, and then I'm like, oh, fuck this, I'm going back home.
Yeah.
My last trip was in October, and it was abnormally cold for Massachusetts, and I was already fed up with the temperature, and I was like, you know what? I'm not staying an extra week. I'm going home. Goodbye, family.
Yeah, it's nice to live in a place where things are alive all year around, instead of just dead dead for such a large portion of the year. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, all right, so you're in Hawaii. You've landed. You've kind of got yourself set up. How is it getting into your new congregation and getting adjusted there? Because you're kind of leaving one where you finally felt at home. You finally felt a purpose and everything, and then now you're going 5,000 miles away. What's it like trying to fit into this new place?
Well, that was kind of the beautiful thing at the time is I went from a congregation in need to another congregation of need. Um, in the 6 days of me planning my trip to leave to Hawaii, I was calling my boss, who was an elder in a different congregation, and I was like, "Are there any congregations that I can get a place near that need help?" So he put me on with this congregation in Hawaii called the Kohala congregation, and I mean they are tiny, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, on average, we probably had maybe 30 people, and that's for a Sunday.
Ooh.
So, at first they were really bummed because my old congregation was not. I don't know if they were convinced that I was going to stay in Hawaii, so they were kind of dragging their feet on sending my publisher cards. So for the first 3 or 4 months of me being in my new congregation in Hawaii, I couldn't do anything other than comment. But once they got my cards, they just kind of assimilated me right away. Once again, I was put in charge of the territories. We had this new application that we were using to divide the territory, so I did that too. They put me in charge of memorial campaigns. I was once again on the sound. I got the responsibility of letting people know if they had a duty on sound. So if they had stage or microphones, I was told that I was the guy who was supposed to let them know. And I was even told to put elders. I mean, not in their place, but I was supposed to correct elders if, let's say, an elder had the stage. Well, according to the elders in my hall, anyone who has the stage is supposed to be there 15 minutes before the meeting starts at minimum. So if any elder who had the stage on any given night came in 5 minutes before the meeting, I was supposed to correct him, which was intimidating.
Yeah,
it was really intimidating. So, but eventually I worked with an elder, and I was like, well, how would you do it? And he helped me to not be a smartass about it. But yeah, that was it. Anytime a question about the territory came up, I was the guy they asked about it. If a brother or sister needed to check out a territory, they called me. Even if I was working, I would stop working, open my phone, and check out the territory to them. Which of course didn't bother my boss because he was a witness, so it was all good. And yeah, anytime the circuit overseer came around, he would usually come and find me and ask me questions about the territory and how we were doing and completing it and all this other stuff. So I once again, I felt like I had a place that I belonged in.
Well, that sounds like a pretty ideal spot to land. I mean, first of all, it's Hawaii, but second of all, you've got this congregation that you're clearly fitting in at and that values you. You've got work that you can do that where you have skills. Why are you on my podcast? how do how do things go from there? Because how old were you when you got to Hawaii? 21 or
I was 20
20
when I
still?
first got here.
Okay,
Yep.
gotcha. And so you're 22 now. So how do things kind of progress? Because there's not a lot of time there.
Well, I didn't get disfellowshipped until about 7 months ago at the age of 22. And between that stance, I was making friends and spending time with people who are my age because once again, I was in a congregation where the average age was at least 58. Um, and we had in this congregation, we did have a couple young people. One of them ended up becoming my best friend. I literally went over his house every single day after work, and that's no exaggeration. I ate dinner with his family all the time, and we hung out all the time. The other one was a little bit more quiet, so we got along, but we didn't have a lot in common. But anyways, after I kind of got sick of hanging out with dudes, I started branching out to other areas of the island trying to meet sisters because I felt that I was at an appropriate age where I could start considering the idea of getting married. So I started getting to know people. And it wasn't like I was flirtatious or anything like that. I was just friendly, and we would organize these group activities, camping or giant basketball tournaments, or we'd go to the beach and play volleyball for a day or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you've already told us you don't have game.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't.
I'm just teasing, like any of us really did.
Yeah. At this
It's
point in
different
time,
as a witness. It's so different.
yeah, at that point in time, the only game I had was on my Xbox. So
Yeah. I mean, what is witness? What is witness flirting anyway? It's just basically.
Can I buy you a coffee?
Yeah, yeah. Witness flirting is going bowling together. And
Yeah.
like I don't know. It's just yeah.
So in the process of me meeting all these people, of course, I started developing romantic attractions to people. And one girl who I was really interested in, and it wasn't even, I wasn't really attracted to her at first until I started to get to know her and learn about who she was as a person. And that was what drew me to her more so than how she looked. I mean, obviously I thought she was pretty, and I liked everything about her. She was very compassionate to me. She understood like my situation with my parents and how touchy it was. And she was just a listening ear when I needed it. So obviously feelings developed. Well, to cut that story short, I ended up telling her how I felt about her. And at first she pulled the "I'm not ready to get married" card. And so I said, well, I'm not in any rush. So if you feel like you need some time to sort yourself out, I'll just be waiting around in the corner. And she was like, no, don't waste your time because I don't see it happening. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I moved on. Like, all right.
Yeah. Not much you can do.
No, yeah, it was kind of a lost cause. And I mean, there was a whole lot of drama that went with that because she tried to play the victim and she was telling everybody that she was contemplating dating me. And I was like, well, you have a funny way of showing it if you tell me that I stand zero chances. So, but I guess that just comes from the JW lifestyle of always having a persecution complex.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on around dating.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. I don't understand it. But the second girl is the one I got in trouble for. So prior to her and I getting in trouble, I was doing my second seldom work trip in Tennessee. I was on the up and up. I was on the verge of being appointed a ministerial servant. The only reason I wasn't appointed was because of my prior approval. I guess you have to wait at least 3 years before you can be appointed a servant if you've been approved. And I was within weeks of it.
Okay.
So anyways,
I didn't know that was a rule.
I didn't either. Apparently it's not like a black and white rule. It's more like a suggestion from the society that they just want to make sure you're not going to fall back into the same habits that you were doing or whatever.
Well, in 3 years, I mean, that is biblical.
Yeah. And apparently it's 7 years to be appointed an elder if you've been approved, which I also didn't know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I started spending time with this girl who was in my congregation who I had never noticed before, ever. And her mom was really, really like laid back and kind of chill. And I would go over their house. I mean, it started off with group activities, right? We would hang out as a group and stuff like that. Or we would hang out with an elder at his house. But then eventually I just started going to her house and I would stay there till 3 a.m. And I even slept over a couple times, which is a no-no if you're a witness. But I mean, her mom was pretty okay with it, and she was the one who offered. She's like, "Oh, if you don't want to drive home, just sleep over." And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, I stayed over at Jenny's parents' house. It was like an hour away, and when we were dating, there were many nights where I slept on their couch. You know, I mean, like, um, nobody seemed to have much of a problem with it.
Yeah, she. I mean, the elders cared about it after the fact, but her mom didn't care. So I just crashed on the couch, and I would wake up and take off to go to work or go out in service or whatever. So, anyways, eventually we started staying up later than her mom, and well, I mean, you know how that goes when you're with someone that you're attracted to and you're by yourselves. And you're both sexually oppressed for your entire lives.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's obvious where that could lead.
Yeah, I mean, and we didn't even have like traditional sex,
Sure.
and which I didn't know was against the rules until after the fact. So, anyways, she felt guilty about it, and she turned herself into the elders. And um, I have always been the type of person that keeps my romantic life to myself,
Sure.
because I always hated that the second you started dating somebody, every witness you knew of was walking up to you and either making jokes or they were dead serious about, when's the wedding? When are you getting married? Like, how serious are you taking it? Like, can I just date somebody and see if we're compatible first before you start drilling me with marriage questions?
No, no, not at all. They have. I mean, it's like it's instant, and
Yeah.
it's so invasive. There's
Yeah.
so much
So I,
pressure there. Yeah.
I kept it to myself for the most part, and I mean there was very very few people who even knew I liked her, let alone that we were dating. And I mean that obviously got blown out of the water when she told the elders. So yeah, I and then I got a call. I tried to go down because the mom was very upset that we were doing this stuff in her house, which I totally understood. And I took the time out of my day to drive an hour and a half to her mom's house to try and apologize and amend the situation.
Mm-hmm.
To which I got physically assaulted in front of the elders who didn't do anything about it. And I
What is physical assault? Did she like hit you with her shoe or something?
No, she like slapped me like 3 times.
Really?
And I don't believe that you should ever hit a woman, but I do think you have every right to restrain her if she's swinging at you. So that's what I did. I
Absolutely.
just I shook her off me, and I got in my car and I took off. And before I left, the elders were like, "Oh, Nico, just hang on a second." And I was like, "Dude, I understand you're trying to do something good, but I'm not staying here with that." And I drove off, and I was super pissed. And I was like,
Well, yeah. I mean, that's uh, yeah. You don't get a free pass to hit somebody because you're female. Like that.
yeah,
That's not how that works. And I get that she was upset. My assumption is that whatever happened between you and her daughter was consensual.
yep,
So therefore, it's not just your fault, and she gets a free pass at you to assault you as she pleases. That's not how it works, and I'm surprised the elders uh, didn't intervene at all. But I don't
yeah.
know.
They
That's
they they literally sat back and watched the whole thing unfold. And And I mean, I told them, I was like, look, if you guys want to talk to me tomorrow about the situation, that's fine, but I'm not staying here. And I
yeah.
left. And of course, they didn't call me the next day because obviously they didn't give a shit. Um, they called me 2 days later and they're like, oh, so we have a elders meeting with you this Wednesday. And, it would be in your best interest to be completely honest about the situation. And I was like, okay, whatever. I've been here before. Not surprised.
Right.
um, but then the elders meeting was very it was very weird because the last elders meeting I was in, it felt like the elders were actually trying to help me out, and they were trying to understand. They were trying to help me understand why what I did was viewed as wrong from the Bible standpoint, and I think they did a good job. These
Well, yeah,
elders,
and sexting isn't it's not sex.
yeah,
It's
it was more on principle.
yeah, it's more on principle. So they have to kind of go a little deeper on that and try to help you understand. Whereas this, I have a feeling I know where this is going, but I'll let you tell.
Yeah, so I get to the elders meeting, and of course I was in tears because I was feeling like, I hurt someone else's relationship with Jehovah, and I hurt my relationship with Jehovah. And being the person that I was, and being such a people pleaser and just loving people regardless, it really bothered me. So I got to the elders meeting and I was in tears, and I'm trying to communicate with these guys. And I mean, I don't want to play the victim card, but all they did was point fingers at me. I mean, they put zero blame on the girl at all.
Well, it's
And
interesting because I'm paying attention to words, and you literally just took all the responsibility when you brought it up. How you had hurt somebody's relationship with Jehovah, and you had done this thing, and personal accountability is my forte and something I really appreciate. I respect personal accountability, and you are being accountable, but it wasn't just you in this situation, and you just kind of phrased it as though it was all you, and then the elders, of course, it sounds like they were just going for punishment, and making
totally.
it all about you. And I wonder if your past, if that one incident in your past, kind of preceded you, and therefore they were labeling, putting it all on you, or if the elders knew this young sister, and had maybe, watched her grow up in the congregation. So you're the evil outsider. I just,
Oh no, that's exactly what it is. So I mean, I never told the elders how I felt about taking someone else's relationship with Jehovah, and I tried to explain to them, like, I was like, look, I understand that my part in this was wrong,
right.
but at the same time, you guys are pointing fingers at me when I'm not the only one who needs to be pointed at. I mean, it takes two people, and for one thing, I was just on the receiving end. I didn't even do anything. I mean, if you're looking at it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, all they did was, they hammered on me real hard. They made me feel super guilty and ashamed for what happened. And they blatantly made it look like it was like I tried to force it to happen, and like I was manipulating the girl into doing what she did. And I was like, first of all, it was her idea. I was ready to go home. So, I mean, but you guys can weave the story however you want. And as far as what you said, because they've known this girl for so long, they have, the elder that was on my committee is practically this girl's dad. She doesn't have a dad because he's not a part of her life, but he, for all intents and purposes, took that place as her dad. I mean, she lives with them now.
No, there's no conflict of interest there.
No, not at all. And it's totally justified according to Jehovah's standards, because the elders are appointed by him, and they're perfect by every sense of the word. So yeah, so I do think, I mean, I honestly think both of us should have been disfellowshipped because we committed the same act. But I also think that she was let off the hook because while her adopted dad, I guess we can say, was the chairman of her committee, he wasn't the chairman of my committee, but he definitely was a very strong influence because for the most part, he was the only elder who said anything.
Well, so wait a minute. And so you're saying that she wasn't disfellowshipped?
Nope.
Okay. But you went in tears, and you felt bad for impacting someone else's spirituality. Like you were owning that. So How does that not meet repentance?
I have no idea. And I mean, I personally,
Because it's all subjective.
I think they were ready to disfellowship me from the start of the meeting because
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been in a judicial committee or not.
Nope, just heard a billion stories.
Yeah, so but what they do is they bring you into the room, they talk about the situation, and then they basically kick you out and say, "We're going to talk about this."
Right.
In less than 5 minutes, I was called back in, and they were given the verdict.
Yeah.
And I made them wait for me because I was in the middle of praying in tears because at that point in my life, I thought that was the only thing that defined me as a person was being a Jehovah's Witness. And I was like, I can't lose this precious identity that I have as one of your people. This is what I'm saying to God. And
yeah, no, that's a good point because it is your identity.
Yeah, I mean, it's all I
at that
had,
point.
really.
Right.
And so for them to call me back in within 5 minutes and be like, "Oh, so we're going to disfellowship you." And then on top of that, I was told that I couldn't come back for at least 2 to 3 years.
What?
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, yeah, you won't be able to come back for 2 years, maybe 3."
Why? What? Like that? That's not legal. I'm just teasing legal. Like that's not right. You can't. That doesn't exist, or it's not supposed to exist. That's wow. They really went above and beyond with you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was credited to me being the outsider, and a lot of it is credited to how close the elder who really harped on me was to the girl that was involved. And I mean, I understand, your personal feelings are bound to get involved. But I mean, if you're supposed to be shepherding the congregation, you should have said, I can't be on this committee because I'm too emotionally involved, and they should have picked a different elder. But
yeah, that's kind of railroading somebody, to be quite honest. And yeah, the fact that if they told you that you can't come back for 2 to 3 years, that shows that this was personal.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I didn't see that at first because I was like, oh shit, I really fucked up if they think I can't come back for 2 years, because I've had friends that were disfellowshipped and they came back in 6 months, 8 months, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's typical.
And I was like, oh man, I must have did something really bad. But then a couple things that happened after that meeting that really got under my skin. The first thing is of course the elders always tell you, nobody is going to know the details of your meeting until the announcement that your disfellowship is made. And outside of that, no one's going to know like why you got disfellowshipped or anything like that. It's just the fact that you are disfellowshipped, and that won't be announced until the first meeting after 7 days, because you're allowed to like dispute it. Yeah, appeal. And so 2 days after my meeting, I get a call, and she said, "Oh, I heard what's happening to you." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Oh, I heard that you're getting disfellowshipped." And I was like, "And who told you that?" And she says, "Oh, it's Kirk." And this is the same elder that was harping on me in my elders meeting. That's this girl's father, basically. And I was like, huh, so it's okay to lie to me and say that everything's going to be held confidentially, but then for you to deliberately go behind what you said and tell her information she didn't need to know.
So he told the girl.
Yeah.
I mean, that just shows, man. This is you got hosed, brother.
And that I don't know if he told anybody else, but I do know that there were at least 3 more people who called me and were, giving me hugs and, feeling super sorry for me because I was getting disfellowshipped. In my head, I'm like, how the hell do these people know that? Because I haven't told anybody, because I was still deciding whether or not I wanted to appeal. And I mean, I was very strongly discouraged from appealing. In fact, one elder that I was super close to, that I viewed him as my uncle, he told me straight up not to. He was just like, it's not a good idea. Don't appeal it. Just accept your discipline and your counsel.
And do you know what the appeal is? It's not really like although there are other elders who will look at it, um, it's not that they're going to like retry your case, so to speak. All it is three elders will look and see if those other three elders did anything wrong.
Yeah.
So it's not even about hearing the evidence and seeing if they come to a different conclusion. They will support whatever conclusion the original body of elders made. They're just looking to see, like, did the elders do something procedurally wrong? That's all that they care about. It's not about people. It's about procedure and policies. So that's all it is. They were never, even if you'd appealed, it wouldn't have done you any good.
Yeah. And, well, because of that, counsel I was getting from this guy that I was super close with, I decided not to. I just declined my right to appeal, and then
probably would have gone well for you. Yeah.
No, it got announced. And then to get to what I was talking to you about before we started the interview with the suicide stuff, it's about here where I started to experience that, and it's not even from me. So at this point, I've been disfellowshipped for maybe a month and a half at max, maybe 2 months. And I was still living with my roommate, who was a brother, and our other roommate. There was 3 of us total who were both brothers. Now, one of them wasn't baptized, so he would still talk to me, but the other one, nothing at all. And randomly, he came into my room one night, and he says, "Hey, have you talked to, I don't want to say her name, so I'm just going to call her Stacy."
Okay.
He says, "Oh, have you talked to Stacy lately?" And I was like, "No, why?" Like, in my head, I'm like, what a stupid question. I'm disfellowshipped. Why would I talk to her? Or why would she talk to me, rather? But I just told him no. And he's like, "Oh, well, she's been reported as missing, and I was told to ask if you knew where she was." And I was like, "Nope, no clue."
Wow. And now, just for context, Stacy is not the girl that you were involved with.
Stacy is the girl.
Stacy is the girl. Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so
yeah.
So this is the girl you were involved with. Okay.
So
she's missing.
I didn't really think much of it because Stacy's relationship with her mom is very, very touchy, and it's not her fault. Her mom has a personality disorder, which makes them two getting along very difficult.
Sure.
So when I first heard that she was missing, I just assumed she needed space from her mom because it wasn't the first time that happened. And I kind of just brushed it off. I was like, well, she just needs space, so it's not a big deal. So anyways, I'm in my room. I'm just playing my guitar, trying to keep my mind off things. And I get a phone call from my friend Veronica's father. And he says, "The police just left my house. They're looking for Stacy. If you have any information on where she could be, please either call me or call the cops." So immediately I called him back and I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Oh, well, she's been missing all day." And, there's I don't know what you call it. Is it an APB?
Yep.
Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Missing persons report. And cops were looking everywhere for her. So, I mean, of course I got concerned, right? And then after I hang up with him, the elder that was directly responsible for disfellowshipping me, the elder that I said is basically this girl's father, he calls me. And as soon as I saw his face pop up my phone, I was really pissed off, but I chose to answer anyways. And I tried to be as dignified as possible because I was determined not to be the evil disfellowship person that Jehovah's Witnesses love to narrate us as.
Right.
So I answered the phone, and he was basically, for lack of better words, kind of an asshole about it. He's like, "Oh, have you seen Stacy?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Oh, well, to be honest, I'm really glad to hear that she's not with you." And I was like, "Okay, go ahead and throw salt in the wound, why don't you?"
Okay.
So, and I was like, "Well, is anyone looking for her?" And he was like, "Well, her mom is convinced that the police will find her." And at this point in time, there was recently an island-wide manhunt because some dude had shot and killed a cop, and so the entire island was looking for this one guy, and it took 3 days to find him. And I said to him, I was like, "So you expect me to think that cops who took 3 days, I mean, to no fault of their own, took 3 days to find a murderer, you somehow think they're going to find her in a reasonable amount of time before something bad happens. So I hung up the phone and I just immediately took off driving, looking to all of our normal spots we would hang out. And I mean, it's like 2.5 hours of me just driving around the island looking for her. Eventually, I found her, and she was in pretty rough shape. She had locked herself in her car and taken 13 full bottles of prescription drugs.
Holy crap.
Yeah, and she had a suicide note written out and ready, and I had to wait 15 minutes for her to get out of the car. And when she
Well, you had to wait 15 minutes for her to get out of the car? Like, what? So was she
yeah,
lucid?
yeah, she was completely out of it,
Oh,
and
she was out of it. Okay.
I mean, she was still conscious, but she just barely. And I'm knocking on the window, and I'm yelling, I'm not leaving until you get out of the car. So she finally opens the door, and she stumbles over to me, and I just looked at her, and she was like, "Oh, I just thought it would be better if I wasn't around anymore." And so immediately, I hugged her, and I was like, "Don't you ever think that. Your life is worth living no matter what people think about you." And she was a little reluctant at first, but she agreed to let me call the cops and get her an ambulance to take her to the hospital.
Yeah.
And so I ended up following her to the hospital behind the ambulance. I got police escorted, which was convenient because for whatever reason, there was a lot of people on the road. Sorry, I can't help it. I'm crying a little bit, but
No, man, that's. I mean, this is heavy as can be. I mean, uh,
so I get to the
person. Yeah, go
hospital,
ahead.
and I guess she was asking for me, but the nurses wouldn't let me see her. And so I called the elder that she views as a father because I wasn't talking to her mother because she threatened to sue me for whatever reason. I was like, you don't have a leg to stand on in court because your daughter was an adult. So, but anyways, I called this elder who I hate with a passion because of what he did. And I told him everything that happened. And then after I hung up with him, the cops came back because I guess they had to take a statement from the doctors or something like that. And they said, they were like, "Oh, if you were 5 minutes later, it would be a very different story right now. So consider yourself lucky that you were able to find her when you did." And that, like, it kind of broke me a little bit because
Yeah.
I was like, how can you have so many people around you that are supposed to love you that can let you get to a point like this, and not a single one of them is out looking for her at all, not even her mom. So like that just really, it bothered me so much, and for a long time it caused a lot of conflict in my heart because I was still trying to be a witness and I was trying to come back at that point in time.
It's back to that. It's back to that unassigned territory thing. If you really believe lives are at stake, why aren't you out there calling on those people who are an hour and a half away that you've been given lists of that are supposedly so interested? It's not about people with them. It just isn't, and it's so sad.
It is, and it's sad that it's not about people, but it's more sad that so many people don't see what the actual agenda is, and they're just blindly following
Yeah.
basically this group of guys
Yep.
that's telling them what to do. So apparently the nurse told me she was asking for me, but they wouldn't let me back there until her parents showed up. So her mom gets there, of course, doesn't look at me, doesn't say a word to me, nothing. She's all emotional, in tears. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't really feel bad for her being in tears because I was angry at the fact that she wasn't looking for her and she wasn't doing anything to help the situation.
Sure.
I later found out that the reason she was trying to kill herself was because her mom basically was calling her a piece of shit and wished that she had never been born. And I was like, well, geez, no wonder. I mean, if the one person who's supposed to love you unconditionally is treating you like that, it's no wonder you were in that situation.
Yeah, if her mom's got a serious personality disorder, that's a rough environment to be raised in.
Yeah, so I didn't feel bad for her because I was mad that she wasn't doing anything to help. And at the time, I didn't know why Stacy was in this situation. I just knew that nobody was looking for her, and I was angry. So the mom gets there, then the elder who disfellowshipped me and her and his wife get there, and um, the doctors call the mom in, and the mom goes back, and then the mom comes back out and says that everybody except me can go back and see her. And I was just so mad because I was like, you can't put aside our differences for 5 minutes for the sake of someone's life being at stake. Like, what kind of love are you guys teaching? Because obviously something's missing.
Yep.
So, anyways, everyone comes out of the room, and I basically got kicked out. I mean, they were nice about it, but I pretty much got kicked out. And then the elder who disfellowshipped me says, "Can you drive me to Stacy's car? Because we're going to leave our car here for the mom who was staying overnight, and we're going to take their car home." So I had to sit in the car for 15 minutes with this guy who I despise. And the entire time, he's not asking me, "Hey, I know you guys were close. Are you okay? I know this is probably traumatic for you too." All he cared about was my meeting attendance. And he was like, "Oh, well, did you make it to the convention?" And I was like, "No." "Have you been going to meetings?" "No." "Oh, well, you should really start
Fuck
getting back
that
to those
guy.
meetings." I know. And I was like,
Oh.
dude, are you serious right now?
Yeah, I'd have
That's
driven
what
him
you're
somewhere.
concerned with?
I'd have driven him somewhere for sure.
Oh, man. And it just,
Holy fuck, man. Come on,
like,
people. Be better than that.
my desire to go back to being a witness from that point on, that was like the defining moment where I was kind of broken, because I was thinking at the time, this is my life. I fucked it up. I have to fix it. But then I started questioning that, because I'm like, obviously all this guy cares about is my meeting attendance, doesn't actually care about me as a person. So how much of a spirit-directed shepherd can he really be? And this is kind of how I started my journey to deciding that I was never going to go back to being a Jehovah's Witness ever. And I remembered a question that my roommate had asked me. And he was like, sometimes I don't feel like praying actually does anything. And of course I defended at the time, but as I was questioning how loving this man could be as a shepherd of Jehovah, I also just started questioning if he actually even cared. And so I said to myself, I'm like, you know what? Instead of using the Bible to prove God's real, because obviously it's going to say God's real, I'm going to prove that God is real without using the Bible. I'm going to use history. I'm going to use science. I'm going to find proof that the things the Bible says are actually true.
Uh-oh.
And I was very careful not to go to apostate websites. And your podcast, this JW Life, I'm not going to lie, I avoided it because I didn't realize it was a counter narrative for Jehovah's Witnesses. I thought it was pro JW, and I was like, nope, not listening to that.
That's hilarious.
It wasn't until much later when I just so happened to type the word "shunned" on the podcast to see if I was just, shooting the ball to see if it would go. And I popped up on that. And I don't remember exactly which interview it was, but in one of the interviews, it may have been at the end, where you talk about, if you want to learn more about the cult, check out this JW Life. And I was like, oh, it's an anti-JW podcast. I'm gonna go listen to that right now. And yeah, that's kind of what got me going on my journey. And the first thing I discovered was, I was like, all right, I'll start with something easy. How about Noah's Ark? That should be easy to prove. If the entire world was flooded, I should be able to find evidence of that in 5 minutes on the internet. And of course I didn't. And I found a lot of scientific videos that for a fact prove that Noah's Ark couldn't have been a real story, because if the entire earth was flooded, we would see evidence of that in the geography of the planet, and we don't. So
But Nico, science is satanic.
yeah.
That's Satan's religion.
Yeah. Well, the reason I was on this journey is because I've always had the life philosophy of absolute truth can be proven absolutely. So even if someone says that something's true, I should be able to prove it, despite what critics will think about what that person said.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really bought into the whole apostate thing. I mean, I followed the rules because I wanted to be a good Jehovah's Witness, but I never really fully believed that they were totally wrong. And it always bothered me, like, well, if we have the truth, like, why can't we just entertain what they say? Because we should be able to prove it wrong anyways, right? Because absolute truth can be proven absolutely. So
yeah, isn't it funny how we apostates, we're supposedly led by Satan, right? And
yeah,
we have Satan's deceptive ways, and we can basically mind fuck people into doing whatever it is that we want them to do. But if that's the case, isn't Jehovah's hand pretty short? Are you telling me that Jehovah is stronger than Satan, but be afraid of people who use these satanic devices to warp your mind and turn you against Jehovah? Well, if you're a true believer and Jehovah is backing you, why can't Jehovah help you see through the bullshit if we apostates have nothing of value to say and it's just, it's satanic, whatever? Like, the truth should win out over the falsehood. Jehovah should be stronger than Mike Shemwell talking on a fucking podcast. If you know what I'm saying? Like, how strong is your damn God if a jackass in his basement can undermine your faith? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yep.
Your God's got problems. That's pretty weak.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was my whole self-justification for not using the Bible to prove God, is because that's exactly how I thought. I was like, well, if this is the truth, then it's going to win out over anything that I can find that will go against it.
Oh, buddy, you can't go down that path.
So yeah, I started with Noah's Ark, and I started researching science, and I started trying to find out, okay, well, have we ever found a remnant of Noah's Ark? And I couldn't find anything like that. So then I said, okay, well, what about, like, let me look into people who build wooden boats for a living. Like, someone must have tried to reconstruct this thing and said that it for a fact could have been created. And that would have been enough for me. And then I discovered that, I guess in Britain, there was actually a group of boat craftsmen. I don't know what their real name is, what they call themselves, boat engineers. And they said that basically an ark of that capacity, that size, wouldn't last for longer than a minute on the open seas. And never mind the violent rainfall and gushing water that was flowing from the heavens, according to the Bible story.
But no boat that they made would have Jehovah's backing.
Yeah.
So,
well, at this point, I was just looking at things without looking at them through the lens of God, because I was like, if God exists, he will put proof, and you won't need faith. If God really is real, then he shouldn't rely on something as fragile as faith. He should have concrete evidence to prove his existence. And I couldn't find it. I mean, I started with the ark. Then I moved to the story of Moses and the Red Sea. And I was like, well, let's see if there's any Egyptian stuff at the bottom of the Red Sea. And couldn't find any evidence of that. And then from there, once I was kind of convinced that the Bible was basically bullshit, in my opinion, then I started saying, okay, well, I can overlook the faulty Bible stories. I still think Jehovah's Witnesses preach the right thing, and for the most part, they have it right. So the next logical step, let me research the organization. Let me see where they got their beginnings. But I'm not going to use jw.org. I'm going to use everything else. And that's what I did. And so I found some videos on YouTube that explained where the Bible comes from, which kind of shook me up a bit. I found I'm not sure if you're familiar with the John Cedars channel
Oh yeah.
on YouTube.
Oh yeah, Lloyd
Fucking love
Evans.
that guy.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I love Lloyd. He's the man. So I started just watching his videos. There's another guy named Telltale on YouTube that I watch a lot.
Yep.
And again, your podcast, but I stumbled on your podcast by accident because I was just throwing rocks in a lake, and I was like, let me just see, like, if there's anyone out there like me who thought it would be a good idea to make a podcast about being shunned. And then it just happened to be after you had started making a podcast called Shunned, so it just kind of worked out perfectly.
Jehovah's Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Led you to the right place.
or Satan's, depending on how you look at it. And then once I was convinced that Jehovah's Witnesses didn't have it right and that they were very crooked, because I started looking at things like, well, their finances, how their teachings have changed. And that was one of the things that, for Lloyd Evans, that gave me a lot of credibility to watch him, is the fact that for most of his stuff, it comes from their own literature.
Yep.
Which was huge for me because, I was still in that cult mindset of like, well, this guy could just be making it up. He could be an apostate who's making up lies. But then, he quotes and shows you on screen copies of Watchtowers that a lot of them aren't that old. I mean, a lot of them are pretty recent. And it's like, well, okay, so that pretty much proves to me that JWs are a bunch of bullshit. So I'm not going back to that. But the thing that really cemented it was me discovering all the child abuse. And child and molestation, just rapists and mm-hmm. just stuff that goes unreported. It's not even just kids. I really love listening to David's story, and I even messaged him after to express my appreciation, because it just, at the point I was in my waking up, and I was just starting to learn about that, to hear someone's story firsthand was like someone just dropped a concrete pillar on what I was starting to learn. And it was just at the right place, the right time.
Yep.
And then I watched the JW broadcast where Brother Let said not to believe the satanic lies that Jehovah's Witnesses protect pedophiles. And I was like, that's a little confusing, considering the Australian Royal Commission has a list of over 1,800 names that you guys have kept a secret since 1950. So how can you say that they're satanic lies?
Because he's an insane rubber-faced douche.
Basically.
He looks like freaking Cecil the Turtle. He is the most weird-looking dude. Like, you can just see the, I mean, not to make light of mental illness, but because, I mean, hell, I probably have ADHD, and that's qualified as a disorder, and, whatever. We all have our struggles, but, you could see the mental illness dripping off of the governing body members. Like, those guys are nuts.
Yeah. It's just funny because I used to love Anthony Morris and Brother Let so much, and now I'm like, oh, God, you guys are fucking crazy. And I mean, hypocrites by any extension of the word.
So you loved Tony Morris?
Oh, I loved him. I
really?
used to play in my car on my way to and from work, to and from the meetings. He actually went to a neighboring congregation when I still lived in Western Massachusetts and gave a talk that was themed around Satan being a bird catcher, and it was about all his different tactics and all this other shit.
Yep.
And I loved that talk so much that I would literally play it every single day. Even though I'd already heard it a million times, I'd play it every day, to and from work, to and from service, to and from my friend's house.
How did it make you feel?
I felt empowered because I was like, well, here's this guy, Satan, right? Mm-hmm. Who's trying to manipulate me away from my God, who I viewed as, Almighty, the Supreme, the only way to truth and everlasting life. And now I know his tactics. So I know exactly what he's going to do, and I know exactly how to fight him.
And let me ask you, because I've heard of this talk. So how was Satan going to get you?
Oh, well, you have in a wide array of his different tactics. I'm struggling to remember.
Oh, yeah, I've kind of put
Because
you on the spot there. I was just wondering. I mean, I'm sure it's like independent thinking and probably, like scientific evidence of, appearing real or um, I
I
was just wondering what his narrative was.
well, I do remember a lot of it had to do with like your sexual desires.
Ah,
Like
yes.
that was a huge topic. And Satan's going to convince you that this is normal. It's not normal. And of course, he touched on clothing and proper attire. I don't think he was as dead set against tight pants back then as he has become recently. But yeah, it was more focused on the supposed subtle attacks that Satan, because as bird catchers go, they try to be nice and quiet and subtle about how they get the bird. And then once the bird's in the cage, they shut the cage, and that's it. So
It's
he was relating.
almost like Jehovah's Witnesses,
Yeah, exactly.
isn't it? Who's the bird catcher? It's amazing they can give a talk on that because that's what they do. They
Yeah,
understand that.
I feel like if anything, Jehovah's Witnesses are the bird catcher,
Yeah, of
and
course.
Satan is like the animal rights activist who's trying to set the birds free.
Well, yeah, let's look at the Bible. Who kills more people, God or Satan?
Definitely God.
You know what I'm saying? And like God told Adam and Eve, like, if you partake of this tree, Satan supposedly told Adam and Eve, if you partake of this tree, you're gonna know the knowledge of good and bad. And was he wrong? Like, it was Jehovah who was the one who was like trying to hide shit from him. And
Right.
then Adam and Eve were like, hey, let's go ahead and listen to this Satan guy or this snake. Satan didn't lie to them. Um, also, in this very day that they ate from it, they didn't die.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
so many, like they were lied to again. I don't know. The whole Bible, if you take it and really, if you kind of flip that sucker upside down and you see like who you thought was God is, put Satan there and put God as Satan, like it kind of makes more sense. but
Yeah.
anyway, it's just funny because we were in a cult that told, like this bird catcher talk or Tony Morris or Stephen Lett or whoever, so much of what we were told about the other side and the us versus them narrative, so much of what we
Mm.
were told about them was actually true of us.
Yep.
And when you start looking at things in life, and that's what I'm saying, even with the God and Satan in the Bible, when you start flipping the script there, it's like, wait a minute, you could look at this a completely different way. And the same
Totally.
thing was true with everything that we were taught by Jehovah's Witnesses about the outside world. We were the ones who were the caged birds.
Yep.
It's just it's funny for me. I think you're the first person that I've probably interviewed that's been young enough that was into listening to the more new school Jehovah's Witnesses, where the governing body are more out there in public, where they're public figures and they're giving talks and they're on JW broadcasting and all this stuff. I was leaving right before that right when that really started. And so I never really got to that place, but it's interesting to hear somebody who really did look up to these men and listen to their talks and took those words in. That's just interesting to hear your perspective.
Yeah, that's another thing that always puzzled me is they're called the faithful and discreet slave, and yet they're totally okay with being these public identity figures, which doesn't make any sense to me. But whatever, I'm sure they have their issues.
Yeah, well, I mean, didn't they recently pretty much came out and admitted that some investments or whatever didn't quite go as they had hoped, and they were hurting for money a little bit, and they asked people for money, because they wanted to do this building effort and they ended up having to halt construction of a number of things. Well, how discreet are you? Did Jehovah mess up?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just funny the mind tricks we had to play with ourselves, um, to believe some of that stuff, and to all the games we played to overlook some of the things that were going on that
Mm.
were clear mistakes on their part. I mean, we were constantly getting new light, so there were apparently a lot of things that weren't right.
Yeah.
Why did
Yeah.
Jehovah give us the wrong light to begin with? Um,
Yeah. Especially if he's all knowing and almighty.
yeah. Why did he give us the wrong light? How discreet are we here? It's just, I don't know. It's just funny to look back at that stuff. But
And the other, yeah, oh, sorry, I didn't mean
no,
to cut you off.
go ahead.
The other thing I always thought was kind of interesting is, you're always taught that Jehovah never puts his servants to the test, right?
Right.
And yet, constantly, all this new light comes out that puts people to the test.
Yep.
So, but of course, you never think about that until you're out and you're like, well, why, if God doesn't put people to the test, then it makes no sense that we get new light, because I shouldn't be being tested by God. And you can't tell me that it's from Satan, because these men are God's mouthpiece. Right. So
no, absolutely true. It's funny, because I don't know. It's just all so messed up.
It's a common case of, if I knew then what I know now.
Yes. Yes. So you've been out now for what you said, 7 months.
Yeah, just about 7 months. It'll be officially 7 as of tomorrow.
Oh, good. Happy 7-month anniversary, I guess. So how long have you kind of been what you would consider awake?
I think about 3.5, maybe 4 months, around there. I think I've been fully awake for about 2 months, but I've started asking questions and digging about 4 months ago.
Gotcha. It's funny. When I left, I disassociated, and the honest truth is, I still kind of thought they had the biblical truth, and it still took me probably 6 months after disassociating to really be able to break it all down and to see everything for what it was. I knew I didn't want to be a part of it. I knew it wasn't right. I knew something was really ugly there. And, but I still believed that they had the truth. It's funny, how many people have to break this down after they get out. It's so difficult to even bring yourself to look at stuff while you're in. So you've been out you've been out for 7 months. You're awake for 4. What do you like about this new 7-month-old life of yours? What do you enjoy about it?
I think the thing that I enjoy the most is probably 2 things. Number one, anything I do, I don't immediately feel guilt for it if it's not in line with Bible principles.
Yes.
Which is a lot. I do a lot of stuff now that is not okay with Bible principles. And the other thing, which has been huge for me, is not being afraid to talk to worldly people. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not like I was able to flip a switch and all of a sudden I'm friends with worldly people.
Yeah.
I'm still learning how to be around worldly people, quote unquote, because for 22 years, they were someone that I never mixed in company with. I was nice to them, but I was never friends with them. And my coworker, Brian, has been a huge help in that department. He's been there since I was a witness, and he was the first one to know when I got kicked out. And he's just been really helpful. I mean, he was the one whose family I went over for the Christmas story that was shared on the podcast and the Facebook page.
Yeah.
His family is just, they've all helped me so much. And honestly, they probably don't realize how much they've helped me, but just the fact that they're there and that they're nice and that they're willing to accept me despite my past and all that stuff has been a huge help, because I'm starting to learn that, for the most part, worldly people, which I was taught were evil, are pretty good people. I mean, they live their life same as me. They have good values most of the time, same as me. And it's becoming easier to maintain friendships with those type of people.
That's beautiful. It's a wonderful thing when we can start expanding our horizons and start seeing people for who they truly are instead of just defining them with a worldly label, so that we can basically shut them up and not have to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
Um, so, since you've left, is there anything you've learned that's really impacted you for the better?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I've learned that's impacted me would be never believe anything without objective, verifiable evidence. And that is pretty much what I base my life off of at this point. It's only been, 4 months or so, but that's what I'm trying to base my life on is. And I mean that boils down not just to like religious beliefs or things that I understand. I mean that goes with my personal relationships too, because a lot of times I'll hear, "Oh, don't hang out with this person because they're bad" or whatever, you know. And I just, unless I can prove that they're bad, I'm not going to listen to someone else's opinion on that person or that subject or that thing. And I just try to prove everything on my own, and formulate my own opinions outside of other people's.
Yeah, that's thinking for yourself is a wonderful quality. Um, what if so? You're shunned. Um,
Yep.
if you could say anything to your family and friends that shun you, what would you say?
I would say that I miss all of them. Um, my dad, my stepmom, and my only sister and my youngest brother especially. Um, Obviously, I still love all of you guys very much. Um, I personally no longer think that religions should separate family, and I'm fine if they want to remain Jehovah's Witnesses, but I just wish that they would accept me and my lifestyle the same way that I accept theirs, and at least say hi for fuck's sake. Like, just call me and say hi. That's all I need. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. My door is always open.
And
I have.
and that's love. you know, um, That's funny. The biblical example of love, hoping all things, enduring all things, overcoming all things, all this stuff. Like, uh, what you're saying is, I love you guys. And even though we believe differently now, I still love you and I would still hang out with you. That is love.
Yep, and I
Um,
would never ever shut my door
yeah.
on them ever. I. It's just like what I told my uncle on Facebook. I may disagree with what you think, and you may disagree with what I think, but at the end of the day, I still love you and accept you for whatever choices you make with your life. Like, that's your business, and
Yeah.
I got no right to judge that.
That's just healthy boundaries. So, in your new life, things are going pretty well right now. Do you have any dreams? Is there, obviously you're pretty fresh out. You're probably, you know, trying new things and exploring life a bit. But do you have any dreams for the future? Anything that you really want to make out of this new life?
Um, I think it's a little bit of a pipe dream, but I would love to be in a band at some point. Um, I love singing, and I'm learning to play the guitar, so I know I'm
Nice.
a little bit ways off from that. But I can play the hell out of Highway to Hell by AC/DC. So that's kind of a dream or a goal of mine. I would love, even if it was only a temporary thing, because I was in a band for a very, very short period of time as a witness. Um, and I was a member of the band, but we never actually performed. So that's why I say short. uh, and I would just love that experience. I take a lot of my musical influence from guys like Slash and even people like Eric Clapton. I would just love to have that sort of experience where you're going on tour with guys that you love as family, and you're all just playing music together. And I know Guns N' Roses didn't exactly love each other, but other bands did.
But you want to, that sense of belonging and community. Really, it's just like what you had talked about earlier. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I play music with my friend Brian. He plays the ukulele and I play the guitar. But I mean, we're definitely not a band. So, but other than that, I would love to open up my own business. And like you said, I'm kind of fresh out, so I'm still like trying to learn things that I like to do that I wasn't able to do as a witness. So I got my ears pierced since I left, and I love my earrings. I got a tattoo on my arm. I'm getting ready to start a full sleeve on my right arm that I'm dedicating to my family. It's basically a giant family tree, and the roots are going to connect to different symbols or different pictures that my family have picked out that would represent them or their part of the family. Like, for example, my cousin Nico died recently, and she loves butterflies. So there'll be a branch connected to a butterfly of some sort for her.
That's a beautiful tribute. I'm sorry that you lost your cousin.
Thank you. Honestly, for her, I mean, it's definitely a tragic loss. The fact that I'm never going to be able to see her smile again. But it was better in the sense that now she's not suffering. She's been bound to a wheelchair my entire life, basically. I think she was only 23 or 24 when she passed, but I don't know what the afterlife brings, but hopefully it's better than being immobile in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I'm an atheist. I do not believe in any particular God. I do leave room open for the possibility that there could be something out there grander than us. I leave room for open for all the possibilities. I can't believe in something that I don't personally feel there is evidence for. With that said, I mean, as far as the afterlife, although I personally may not see evidence for that, that doesn't mean that there isn't something. And I think that one of the beauties of being outside of a cult and being outside of the way we were raised is the ability to be uncomfortable, or to be comfortable not knowing. And I don't have to know. I don't have to know if there's an afterlife, or I don't have to know if there's a specific God or whatever. Just try to live your life as best as you can now, and whatever happens, what will be will be. And so it's nice to think, maybe there is something for your cousin. There absolutely could be, and we don't know. And if there is, we hope it's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
It's just nice to be able to be open to possibility now in life, and not to see things completely one way.
Yeah, and I think I'm along the same mindset as you. I am an atheist. I don't believe in any God, but that being said, I personally don't find any evidence for an afterlife. But at the same time, I'm not really going to know until I get there.
Yeah.
So, but until then, I'm not too worried about it.
Yep. What is it? So a phrase I like is that a man with an experience is not at the mercy of a man with an opinion.
Yeah.
And for those who have already left this world, they have experienced whatever it is. So it's we'll know when we get to experience it, and until then, all anyone can really proffer are opinions.
Yep.
So I really have enjoyed getting to know you a little bit here. I hope that you continue to grow, and that life brings you good things, that you work hard at having the best life that you can, that you keep this love you have for people, and that you can use it to do something that really matters in this world. And I think that would be a beautiful thing. I want to thank Nico for sharing a story that involves some of his own mistakes that he owned, as well as experiences that shined a light on things that happen within the cult that nobody ever seems to want to own. Nico's a good kid, and he truly obviously cares about people. I've been able to get to know him a bit, and he's like a little brother to me. You'll notice, Nico, if you're listening, that I didn't say son, just much younger brother. That's an inside thing. Oh, and as a way of updating Stacy from the story, Nico said that since the recording of this episode, Stacy has also left the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. They've even moved in together and are starting their lives fresh. I think I speak for everyone in saying that we are very happy to hear that. Many of us, myself included, have histories with suicidal ideations tied into the cult dynamics, and I'm sure I can speak for all of us in sending our love and hugs, and we just want you to know that it does get better. Life gets better. Anyway, if you'd like to leave a message of support for Nico, go to shunnedpodcast.com. You'll find his episode there on the episodes page. You can leave a comment for him. You can find the resources mentioned. There's a store there. You can pick up a t-shirt or hoodie that supports the show. You can also send me an email there or even a voicemail that I can include on an episode. Follow us at Shunned Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also join the Shunned Podcast Facebook group and get into interesting conversations in a supportive environment and find out things behind the podcast first. If you want to hear my personal story, you can do so on the podcast called This JW Life. There are two ways you can support the podcast. If you appreciate the podcast and it's helping you in some way, you can help by supporting it financially at patreon.com/shunned. Supporting the Patreon helps me to keep this going at this rate, and it means the world to me. I'll even shout you out here if you sign up. I'm actually working on some rewards for Patreon subscribers. Stay tuned. That's going to be coming very soon. We can always use some more support. You can also leave a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts for Shunned or for This JW Life. Those 5-star reviews help the show to rank so that other people can find it when they search on iTunes for other podcasts. We're going to close the episode out with the song No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. You can find a link to her song, to the Patreon page for the show, to resources that were mentioned and more, not just on the website, but if you're listening on a podcast app, you can probably get it all in the app by looking at the description. So as we end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.